Hi, Winederlusters, and today I'm speaking with Ben Groundwater.
Welcome to the Winederlust podcast. My name's Jeanene and I run a wine events business in Canberra, Australia. In this season, I'm talking to 12 specialists from the wine industry and the travel industry and asking the hard-hitting questions we all want to know leading up to Christmas. On what to serve, what to buy, and where to go on holidays. So pour yourself a glass and let's get exploring.
Ben is all about travel. He's the author of 3 books, a columnist and feature writer, and his writing has been published all around the world, including various airline magazines and regularly in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. He was named Travel Writer of the Year by the Australian Society of Travel Writers in 2014 and 15. He's the host of the Traveller podcast, Flight to Fancy, which is one of my favourites. Listening to his podcast and reading his articles recently, there's been a lot of chat about wine, so I thought he would be the perfect guest for Winederlust with his love of wine and travel. So to say I was absolutely stoked that he agreed to speak with me is an understatement. Welcome, Ben Groundwater. So thank you so much, Ben, for joining me today. I think most people think you've got a dream job, traveling for a living, but the biggest thing is, how did you get into travel writing? I mean, you have to be a good writer, but from what I've read and heard about you, you've done some pretty unglamorous jobs when you were backpacking in your earlier years.
Yeah, I worked on a farm for a little while in Scotland. I used to be a cook for tours going around Europe, which is all great fun. But the way I got into travel writing, I mean, it's kind of boring in some ways. I studied journalism at uni. I worked for a magazine in Brisbane for a little while, like a sort of lifestyle magazine. And then took some time off and did that job as a cook. I'd always had a sort of relationship with food and stuff that I enjoyed, and I'd always cooked for a living before that. So I did some cooking around Europe for a bit, and then came to Sydney and went back into media and started working for the Sydney Morning Herald on a casual basis, doing sport actually on their sports desk as a sub-editor there. And just got to know lots of people in the newsroom, including the guys who were on travel. And I love travel, and they were sort of looking for new writers or new people to do blogs. Basically, everyone at that time, everybody wanted bloggers, but they didn't really know what blogs were. All they knew were we have to have blogs because that's what cool people do. So I suggested writing a travel blog, which was about sort of budget travel and what I saw as kind of real travel as opposed to what I was reading in a lot of travel sections. Mm-hmm. And that ended up doing really well. And that kind of kickstarted my way into the industry. And it went from just doing one weekly column, and that was all, to sort of starting off and writing a few more normal feature stories. And then I wrote a book, and that sort of has kind of solidified my place there.
So you started in the sports desk because your most recent book is all about the world of sports.
That's another point of passion for me. I grew up playing a lot of sport, and I've always really enjoyed it. And it's kind of, the great thing about being a writer is that you manage to combine, writing itself is a passion of mine, but you can also combine these other things that you love. And food is one of those, wine is one of those, but also sport is one of those as well. And so I've been able to combine sport and travel and writing all together, which is amazing. I was always into sports, so I was a natural fit for the sports desk because I just already knew a lot about the things that I was reading about and writing about. That felt natural, and it felt natural to write this book as well because it's so much of the travel experience for me. I sort of channel culture through sport sometimes when I'm traveling. I try to get along to sporting events regardless of whether I know anything about the sport or anything about the people playing. I find it's just a place to sort of naturally mix with people, with locals, and enjoy something that's not a show. It's not put on. It's not forced in any way. It's just sort of an experience of local passion and local culture, and so I find that really enjoyable.
Yeah, that it resonated with me because I went to Mongolia about 10 years ago, and I timed it for the Nadam Festival with the horse riding and the wrestling and the archery and all the costumes, and it was really cool. So after watching the Ewan McGregor documentary, I had to time it around that. Yep. So I do think that getting that culture and everything through sport is a really great way to do it. So if you can go to matches and stuff when you're overseas, that's a really great thing to be able to do.
And often like they're really bizarre events. Like the Nadam is strange in a lot of ways. And there's things like camel racing in the United Arab Emirates is just bizarre. They have robot jockeys and they race over these 10 kilometer tracks, and it's really hard to understand the love of it and the passion, but just to sort of be there and observe it and be part of that's the real attraction, I think.
Listening to your podcast and some recent articles, your love of food and wine comes up. So do you see a food and wine travel book on the horizon at all?
Yeah, I'm about to sign a deal with my regular publisher, Hardy Grant, to write a big guide to Australian food and wine, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. It'll be a chance to sort of channel that passion into something. I've spent so much time in the past touring Australian wine regions and tasting lots of wine and going to restaurants and stuff. So it'd be nice to get that all down on paper and share the places that I really enjoy going, and also do some more research and find some places that I've never been to.
Oh, that's so cool. So with that, maybe another year or?
Yeah, it's going to be out around November 2022, as as long as all things go to plan.
So sports for Christmas presents this year, and wine and food book.
Yes, that's right, exactly.
You've got it all covered, the whole family.
Yeah.
So you've got a couple of kids now, and I know I've got a young son, and travel has changed since having kids. What are some of the biggest changes that you've noticed here?
It's just, it's a total game changer. Everything has changed. And you'd think that by now, our oldest son is 3 years old. You'd think after 3 years, we'd kind of get used to the idea of traveling with him and knowing what to do with kids, but we just don't. We're absolutely useless. We took a road trip down to Beechworth a few months ago before lockdown, and Beechworth at Rutherglen, wanting to do some wine tasting and stuff, and just thinking, we can take the kids along. We'll go to this winery and then we'll go to that winery, and we tried to hit a million places, and the kids were absolutely bored crazy and started screaming, and the whole thing was an absolute disaster. And we got home, we're like, what were we even thinking? Like, you can't do that with kids. You can maybe go to one winery in a day and then go to a park or a playground or something and give them something that's actually for them and that they enjoy. And then, that's a recipe to having a decent day. But trying to do the same number of things that we used to do and to the same places that we used to go to, it just doesn't work. It's just not worth it.
It is a bit more slow travel, isn't it? Just taking it
which is nice in some ways.
Yeah,
forcing you to slow down and just have a look around, and but literally pick up the flowers and smell them, and put all the rocks in your pocket, and kick all the sand out of your shoes, and all of that sort of stuff.
I remember the sand, yes. Sand pits, yeah. All right, so we'll hit the big questions. So on Christmas Day, what would we find on your table? One of the dishes and a wine that you would have?
So I should preface this by saying that my sister-in-law is a sommelier for, used to work at Sixpenny, which is a 3-hat restaurant, now works at Where's Nick, a wine bar. So she has an extremely good wine knowledge. My father-in-law is also very into wine, has a huge cellar, knows a lot about it. And so basically, I don't bring a whole lot to the table when it comes to Christmas. I don't need to. We do tend to spend our Christmases with that side of the family because my parents are in Queensland, are a little bit more difficult to get to. But generally, they do a Malaysian style turkey, which is turkey with sort of basted with all these sort of Malaysian style spices, which they do usually with like a stir fried sticky rice or something like that, which is absolutely delicious and completely different to what I'm used to eating for Christmas as well. But in terms of wine, usually, always every meal there starts with champagne. Bollinger is a house favorite. Bollinger Rosé, even more. Bollinger Grandannay, if we're really going for it. So maybe a Bollinger Grandannay for Christmas might come out. And then there's usually a Chardonnay. My father-in-law's been drinking a lot of the Polperro Chardonnay lately from the Mornington Peninsula, which is absolutely beautiful. And I think there's a fair bit of that left in the cellar. So some of that
hoping so.
As well. Yeah, that's right. Then if there's a red, it's usually Dalwhinnie winery from the sort of Landsborough down in Victoria as well. It's kind of my mother-in-law is from that area, and so there's sort of some emotional ties there, and it's also beautiful wine. So there's some of that hanging around, which might come out at Christmas too.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm going to have to look up the Malaysian spices of that. That sounds really interesting.
I don't even know where the recipe came from. It's become like there's no Malaysian connection in the family or anything. It's just there's a big deep interest in food there, and that just was done one Christmas, I think, and everyone decided that it was great, so they just keep doing it.
Now this would be hard for you with all these wine enthusiasts in your family and wine experts, but do you have a go-to gift for your wine loving friends and family?
I was having to think about this. I think a really good bottle opener is like your best friend. It makes a real difference. I had no idea until recently when we bought a really beautiful wine wine bottle opener. Just a normal waiter's friend type thing, nothing too fancy or amazing, but just something that's beautifully made and heavy and works perfectly and looks nice as well. It's just something really lovely to have in your home, particularly if you love wine and you're going to use it a lot. It sort of brings you joy. There's a Japanese word for it. For things that bring you joy, everyday objects that bring you joy, and it's called zaka, and that, a bottle opener can be that without doubt, and so that's what I would go with, something that's quite expensive and beautiful that you're just going to have with you all the time.
I lived in Japan and I did not know that word, so that's a terrible.
I think it's one of those fairly recent concepts, I think, in the last 10 years or so. But it's something that I've kind of taken on board and pay attention to now.
No, that sounds great. Especially because you don't, like, breaking a cork is the worst thing, like trying to get that out. So a good bottle opener is a great idea.
Absolutely.
Now, I know it's hard to choose just one great Australian wine region. Have you got one that you've had a great experience at that you'd like to share with us?
I've had a heap of great experiences all around Australia. Really, really love Margaret River. I think, if there was one winery to rule them all for me that I would keep going back to, it would be Margaret River. Best experiences I've had was actually in Clare Valley in South Australia, because it's such a small area. And, went along to Kerry Thompson doing Wines by KT. She runs her own cellar door, and so you're going in there and you're meeting the winemaker and you're talking about the wine to the person who loves it. But then we went out to a restaurant which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, called Seed, which was an amazing place. But in the bar there, a whole bunch of winemakers just hanging out and drinking, and we sort of got chatting to a bunch of different people. And it just, we felt like locals straight away. You're there, you're talking to the experts, and you're made to feel welcome. And that's not a thing you can find, I think, in larger areas, in more touristy areas. But Clare Valley's still got that kind of homely, neighborhoody type feel to it, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, that sounds great. So when international borders open, which wine region would you like to visit or return to?
So I'm thinking, I spent most of 2019 and some of 2020 living in San Sebastian in the north of Spain. And we managed to get across to the Bordeaux region, which is only a few hours away, in particular to Saint Emilion, the sort of sub-region there. And it's just gorgeous. The wine is beautiful. The scenery is incredible. And there's this bakery there in this little village called Montagne, which made the best bread I've ever tasted in my entire life. Baguettes that cost like 80 euro cents and were just life-changing, mind-blowing, just with a bit of butter on them and some raspberry jam, and just incredible. So I want to go back and have that experience again. I think that would make me feel like, everything is right with the world again. We can travel, we can go to these amazing places, we can have these experiences that we're used to. That's something I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, Bordeaux's great. And it's so big. I think I thought it was going to be like the size of the Hunter Valley or something, but it's a massive city. And then each of the little sort of sub-regions larger than I was expecting. So you do need a bit of time
very,
there.
very traditional, very beautiful, like a little bit intimidating in some ways, because, you're going to these sort of premier houses of wine that have been there for hundreds of years. And it can be a little bit stuffy, the tasting experience. Like, you're often expected to go on these big long tours of the winery and learn all about how it's made and stuff. You're thinking, just, can I just have a sip and see what it tastes like? But we did find that, there are places you can just roll up and have a glass of wine and chat to some people, and then that's totally fine as well. And then I found people in that area in particular just so friendly and so nice. I would highly recommend that to people.
Oh, that's excellent. That's great. Thank you so much, Ben. That's some excellent tips for us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe now to get each episode as they drop. Go to winederlust.com.au for everything discussed today. You can also subscribe to my newsletter and hear of all upcoming events, news and merchandise. Till next time, happy wine travels.